You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. Now listen to this. Emphasis here. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. He says, just love God, love people. Love God, love people. But when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit upon his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered in his presence, and he will separate the people as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He'll place the sheep at his right hand, and the goat is at his left. So this is a picture of Judgment Day. This is a picture of the end of times. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you fed me. I was thirsty, and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me into your home. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you cared for me. I was in prison, and you visited me. Sheep, come and receive your reward. Come and receive your inheritance." Why? Because you loved me. Now watch the reaction of the sheep. Then these righteous ones will reply, "Lord, when did we ever see you hungry and feed you? Or thirsty and give you something to drink? Or a stranger and show you hospitality? Or naked and give you clothing? When did we ever see you sick or in prison and visit you?" Watch the king's reply. They're confused. They don't understand. He says, "I tell you the truth. When you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were doing it to me." So what is Jesus revealing in the response of the king here? He's saying that loving people is what separates the sheep from the goats. Why? Because if you don't love people, you don't love God. That's pretty blunt and straightforward and to the point, but it's literally what's coming out of this word. If you don't love people, you don't love God. Love God, love people. They're intrinsically connected. They are the opposite of mutually exclusive. You can't love God and hate people. That's like saying you love Mexican food, but you hate Chipotle. Impossible. Love God, love people. How are the sheep separated from the goats? It's based whether or not you love people. Why is it equally important to love people than to love God? Because, well, Jesus says right here in this parable, when you loved them, you loved me. It was the same thing. Then the king will turn to those on the left and say, "Away with you, you cursed ones, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his demons. For I was hungry, and you didn't feed me. I was thirsty, you didn't give me a drink. I was a stranger, and you didn't invite me into your home. I was naked, and you didn't give me clothing. I was sick and in prison, and you didn't visit me." And he will answer, "I tell you the truth. When you refused to help the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were refusing to help me. And they will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous will go into eternal life." Whether or not they loved people was the basis for which the sheep and the goats were separated. One to eternal punishment, one to eternal life. If you don't love people, you don't love God. Now let me be perfectly clear about this parable, okay? This is not a message of works-based salvation. This is not Jesus saying, okay, if you meet your love quota, if you love enough people, then I'll let you into heaven. Really tempting to read it that way. That's not what he's saying at all. The point that Jesus is trying to make is simply this. The greatest and purest form of evidence of someone who truly loves God with all their heart, soul, and strength is found in whether or not they love their neighbor, whether they love people around them. Love given in exchange for a reward isn't love at all. The moment that you place a condition on your love is the moment that love is lost. That love never gives up. It never loses faith. It's always hopeful. And watch this. It endures through every circumstance. It endures through every condition. there is not a reason that love fails, because love endures through everything. So if I only love my neighbor, if they look like me, think like me, talk like me, vote like me, if I only love my neighbor, if I'm not in a hurry, if I don't have stuff to do, if I only love my neighbor if it's the weekend, if they don't annoy me, then it's not really love at all. It's actually me trying to create an environment that coddles my belief system and strokes my ego. When love is given in exchange for a reward, it's not love at all. We're not meant to manufacture love. We're meant to become it. Right? We're not meant to white knuckle love and stuff down our offense and stuff down our annoyance and just get through it and put on an act. We're meant to become it. Read this with me. 1 John 4:16 says, God is love, and all who live in love live in God, and God lives in them. And as we live in God, our love grows more perfect. So we will not be afraid on the day of judgment, right? On that great day of separation, we're not going to be afraid. Why? We can face him with confidence because we live like Jesus here in the world, because we've been transformed to live and to love like Jesus. See, God is love. So when we live in love, we live in God, and God lives in us. And as God lives in us, we're transformed into the same image of God, who is love. So we are literally becoming love. Love is no longer something that we merely do. We don't turn it on and off. It's someone that we become. So loving people isn't something we have to do through gritted teeth. It's something that starts to flow naturally from who we are, because it's literally just who we are. We love people because it is our identity.
It's almost like we're living in a world which isn't built for us. It isn't for us. It doesn't stand for us, does it? And the data points to that. Now, there's a lot of reasons why. But one of the reasons that I want to share with you today, one of the big reasons why it feels so off to us, is that we have failed to take seriously the most powerful force in life. Love is the most powerful force in business, folks. If you really want to understand how to get more great experiences for employees, more great experience for students, more great experience for patients or customers, you got to look up here at extreme positives. It's what's happening in those places where customers are like, oh, or employees are like, I would go through a wall for her. Like, what's that? If you study those extreme positives and you say, what the heck is going on there? You land on this. Love. And when you look at people that are 10xing it, you'll hear them say, I love that particular activity. I love that particular job. I love my manager. I love that team. I love that brand. I love that restaurant. And they'll use that word, love. Love is the most powerful force in business. If by that we mean what drives human behavior. And we don't have a strategy for it. It's the most bizarre thing. It's the most powerful force in business. We have strategies for doing things cost effectively. We have strategies for doing things efficiently. We have strategies for doing things growth-orientedly. We have strategies for AI. We don't have strategies for doing things lovingly. Why would we do that? Because it's just everything. If you're a leader, you have to lead with love, and that doesn't mean be soft. But you can lead lovingly. You could fire someone lovingly. You could lay someone off lovingly. Loving doesn't mean just nice. What can we do to start building strategies for love? What's love? Here's the definition that I would give you. From all the studies I've been a part of, love is a deep and unwavering commitment to the flourishing of a human. When you say that teacher, God, I loved her, on some level, either implicitly or explicitly, she made me feel like my growth was the point. When you have a leader who you go, I loved them, it's because somehow they cut through all the stuff and they made you feel they weren't getting work done through people. They were getting people done through work. The person was the point. That's loving. Love is that commitment to the flourishing of a human. So the question for all of us as leaders, how do we design love in? And these are those two ways in which you can. Yourself as you move through the world, And then how do we design a loving world? But it's really hard to flourish. It's really hard to have love flourish in a loveless world. We're living in a loveless world. Right now, we're living in that amoral transactional world. As an employee, you're called a full-time equivalent. You're an FTE. Or you're a head count. Because you're an element of a financial equation. That's why it feels so weird today, because we actually don't want you to be a human. We want you to be an element of a financial equation. You're a head count. Of course, what we want is a loving world. We want loving experiences. That's what we want. We don't use that word, but that's what we want. We want a loving world. How do you move someone into a place where they have love in their heart for your team, for your church, for your community, for your company? What I want to leave you with is a lovingly lens. And I want you to put it on from now on so that you can look at the world and you sense something's wrong. But sometimes giving you a language to name it helps us fix it. So I'm going to give you a lens which tries to go loving, unloving, lovingly, unlovingly. And hopefully from now on, you'll never be able to unsee through that lens. You'll always have that lens on. Let me give you some examples of what loving and unloving looks like. Handoffs are unloving. You're going to go out to a restaurant tonight. You're going to go out to a restaurant. You're going to call up. Maybe you've already called up. Maybe you've got an open table. And then you're going to get to the restaurant. And the person who checks you in, the hostess, will not be the person who you booked through. That person will then walk you to the table and you'll sit down and turn to a person to try to get an order or a drink. But that'll be the busser. And the busser will go, sorry, I can't help you. I'm the busser. And then you'll wait a little bit more. And then the waiter will come up and then take your order, maybe nicely. Take your order and then go away, and then you'll wait for the order to come back, but it won't be brought back by the waiter. It's brought back by the food delivery person who doesn't know you at all. Who gets the cheese? Who's got the French fries? Who had the soup? And at Wobertide, you've moved chairs because maybe the air conditioning was too hot on someone or too cold, and you're now responsible for keeping the integrity of your experience all the way through the restaurant. And then when you try to get your check, your waiter's gone already. You got to get someone else, and you walk out. Handoffs like that are unloving. Why? Because they take a whole human being, you, and they disintegrate you. And they put the responsibility on you to keep telling your story. Handoffs are unloving. People who take a stand for what they believe in are loving. People who are vague and shapeshifters are unloving. But if you really were loving about the experience you're creating for your customers, you would take seriously every single touch point. If you are loving, you believe that the person's flourishing is the point, and you do extreme and extraordinary things to convey to people that you come work for us. We want your flourishing, even if that means leaving us. You build a lovingly company, one touch point at a time. We have dismissed and not taken seriously the most powerful force in human life, and certainly in business. And so what we are asking of you, we are looking at you as our leader, and we want you to be happy. But what we're really deep down asking of you as your followers, we're asking you to believe in love as a leader. Because if you are going to make the change that we have to see in the world, if you're going to be a high road leader, you have got to take seriously as a leader this most powerful, divine, spiritual, human force.
And when we love God, we love people. And when we love people, we love God. It's this circular relationship that's designed to perpetuate itself into the day of Christ's return. When we love people, we love God. It's our way of expressing love to God. It's an act of worship. We say it around here all the time, that worship is simply love expressed. We express our love to God, and thereby we worship Him. So one of the best ways that we can possibly do that is to love the ones that He loves. Why is it equally important that we love our neighbor and that we love God? Well, when we love people, we love God. But check this out, and this is where everything turns over. When we love people, it's God's way of loving people. Think about this. When we love people, God is loving people. 1 John 4:12 says, no one has ever seen God, but if we love each other, God lives in us, and His love is brought to full expression in us. What is He saying? God isn't here on the earth. We can't see him, right? The ones that need him, they can't see him, but they can experience him. And the way that they experience his love is through the way that we love each other. So when we love people, we love God. And when we love God, we love people. When we love people, God is loving people. God's love is being experienced for those people. And they can taste and see that the Lord is good. And when they taste and see that the Lord is good and his love endures forever, they start to love God too. And when they start to love God, they naturally just start loving people because that's the relationship. And then they start loving people, and those people experience the love of God, and they taste and see that the Lord is good. And then they can't help but love him, because what's not to love about him? And so when they love him, they start loving people who start loving God, who start loving people. And the road goes on forever and the party never ends. This is God's plan to bring the kingdom of heaven to the earth. Loving people is the plan. It's how the kingdom is going to advance. And the King of all creation thinks so highly of you and so highly of me that he's placed it in our hands. He's given us the great and high calling and the good work of going out and finding those people and loving them so that they will know that there is a God that knows their name, that knows their story, that knows their background, and is madly in love with them because he wants as many sheep to come home as will listen. Loving people is the way that the kingdom of light is going to invade a world of darkness. Why is it equally important that we love people? Because loving people is your purpose. Loving people is the plan. Loving people is how people are going to experience God. Loving people's your purpose. You thought that your work was your purpose. You thought that your work was your purpose, but actually it's just an excuse to get around the people at your work so that they can experience the love of God.